That's all we need. Hello and welcome to another edition of the Tigers Down Under. I'm your host, Alex, and with me I have Dan. How are you, Dan?
Yeah, look, I'm all right. Can't complain after what's been a productive couple of weeks in the championship. So, I'm pretty good.
Yeah, it's been, what is it now, 5 games undefeated, something like that, with that draw against West Brom over the weekend. Since the Swansea game, it's wild. I saw just going on a bit of a tangent for a second to start with, but I saw someone post like the typical championship sort of highlight that you look at Swansea's form, and I think up until they beat Southampton or something like that, up until that game, they had something like 1 win in 7, and that 1 win was against us. And we had 1 loss in 7, and that loss was to Swansea. And it's just like, what a typical sort of championship form line that it can just completely flip for one game. But anyway, we're not here to talk Swansea. We're talking West Brom. 1-1 draw Saturday night. I think it was essentially a must not lose game. And I think if anything, we're in a pretty good position to go and win it.
Yeah, I think it was a cagey sort of opening, but I think overall we did carry on from the previous game pretty well. I think we were playing some nice football, creating some nice chances, but I think West Brom had obviously, I think, done their homework and were very disciplined and did make it difficult for us in a lot of respects. But some nice play, I think some quick thinking, and just a quality finish from Carvalho was real nice to watch. And it's sort of one of those games where, like, we've had so many of these sorts of games throughout the season where we've had a lead, or we've been really close to breaking through, and then it's been one poor decision at a key moment that has undone us. And unfortunately, for Morton, it was his attempt in playing out from the back, sort of to try and switch it high and wide, that didn't really go to anyone, which opened up the opportunity for West Brom to equalise, which is a bit disappointing. But
yeah, I mean, look, in a way, you can't blame Rossini for bringing Morton back in for Slater, but it did feel particularly harsh on Slater after such a good game against Southampton. It seemed one of those where, I guess, a fully fit Morton needs to be in the 11 somehow, and that obvious change was for Slater. But in hindsight, I think obviously the benefit of hindsight is 2020, but Morton didn't have a great game, and I suspect that it's not where we lost or because we didn't lose the game, but where we dropped the points in the game as a result. But it did feel like that selection might have played into it a bit.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. He didn't have. Well, it wasn't to the standard that we've come to expect from him, I think is probably the best way to put it. It wasn't like he didn't have an atrocious game. It wasn't like he had, an absolute meltdown or anything. It just wasn't quite clicking the way that some of those passes and those decisions have worked out, and it looked really slick in some of the those games in the last month or so, but just didn't quite come together. As you say, hindsight is 2020. Maybe sticking with that 11, like it's an unforced change, and maybe it wasn't necessary, but I think either way we had enough pressure, enough ball, enough opportunities, to wrap this up and secure all 3 points anyway. And that does. I don't necessarily think I'm not disappointed to take a point out of this. I think it was sort of, as you say, one that we just couldn't lose. We've actually done. It's probably the first time this season where we've been in a position to sort of where we needed to win games to try and capitalize and maintain, in that top 6 where we haven't sort of fucked it up. Dropped those points and thrown the game sort of away. So,
and even the funny part of that I suppose is actually that it's almost like everyone else did us the favor, that as you say, like usually in all these positions where we just have to go out and win to maintain that gap or increase the buffer or whatever, normally we lose and other teams then gain on us, and all of a sudden we can't find ourselves 8th or 9th or whatever. This time at least, yes, we only got the draw, but you look at a lot of those teams dropping points or losing, like Sunderland losing. They're now, 6 or 7 points behind us, I think, all of a sudden. Like, we were looking at them as basically being level on points with us for a while. Yeah, they're 8 points behind us now, which is quite remarkable. Obviously, Coventry losing as well to Preston, being 4 points behind us now. Preston and then Norwich as well being 3 points behind us. So obviously Norwich with the superior goal difference could catch us if they were to win and we were to lose. But all of a sudden there's a little bit of daylight appearing between the top 6 and the rest. Regardless of the fact that we couldn't get the win in this one. In terms of changes to the team, so Slater coming in, the one I was surprised by, if we were going to change anything, was that we didn't bring a recognised striker in from the start, because you could kind of see it coming a little bit with West Brom being a much more physical side and not giving us the space and I guess the gaps behind their play that Southampton did, where we had more of the ball, we did break them down. When we pressed quite effectively, but you turn the ball over and there's still the West Brom defence sitting back and stopping anything coming in behind them. Like, it's not like a Southampton where you can just slip Carvalho in for an easy goal. So it seemed the sort of game that was set up for a Connolly or a Ohio even to potentially start the game and really put pressure on their defence. And we saw Connolly have glimpses of it when he came on, but that's someone that sort of surprised me, that we didn't have a striker on from the start.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit. I think we sort of referenced it before, but it was different players to create the problem. I think when we seem to have lots of talent and we're trying to figure out how to fit them all in. It's sort of that again. We've recruited in January and you brought in Zaruri and Carvalho and Omer, and you want them all to play because we know we've seen them all have positive impact so far. As well as obviously Philogene returning to the side, and it's like trying to fit all those guys in because we know they're going to have a big impact. But have we unbalanced ourselves at the top end a little bit? In some of these games, and I think recognizing the opposition, the way they're going to play, the characteristics of those players, that you perhaps again we should have thought about playing with someone a bit more recognized, someone who's more likely to want to try and stretch that line, zip in behind, pull them around a bit than like Carvalho and Omer are much more likely to want to come sort of forward off the line to receive the ball and then turn, but then there's no one then there for them to play through. So a little bit frustrating, but I think a good point to sort of continue what's been a really productive sort of little period of the season, where we're in the 6 and we're pretty much we're essentially on the run in now. Like,
I sort of said in the chat
12
this week,
games left or something.
12 games left. Yeah.
So,
I usually get to maybe it's like 6 or 7 games left and we start looking at the league table and seeing who's playing who. And it just so happens that the last 2 weeks now we've got, last week and then this week coming, that we've got everyone sort of playing each other. So it's you can't help but look at who's playing who, because we've got it's Norwich against Sunderland, it's Coventry against West Brom, and I think there's one other one as well that are all, and then obviously ourselves and Preston, all playing each other. You can't help but look at who could do us a favour if all of a sudden you're wanting Sunderland to pick up points off Norwich rather than necessarily wanting a draw in that one. So it is kind of crazy how quickly things can change. I guess last word on the game with the goal that we conceded. A bit of a difference of opinion. I know Mitch in our chat was a bit more defensive of Philogene's efforts in defence on Furlong getting that stooping header. I was a bit more critical, thinking that Philogene sort of switched off a little bit and could have done a bit more to play at the ball. Where do you sort of sit on I guess either if someone was at fault for the goal or if no one was at fault?
I mean, the
or even if
thing
it's
is,
Allsop, you know,
someone's always at fault. As I learned,
the
like
ball's gone in, someone's done
my
something
Sunday
wrong.
league games on the weekend that we played, where I copped my part of the responsibility for the goals, and other people said, "Oh, it's a team sport, no one's to blame." I said, "Yeah, I get that, but also like there's a thing that I could have done better in that situation, which probably would have prevented that goal." And I think probably in that instance, in the way that ball's come in, I think probably Philogene does need to do um, better to stop that opportunity from sort of like, or to stop him being able to Furlong getting the head on the ball. I think the way it's come in and the way he's been able to just actually like head that down in a very controlled manner, down and across, like it's a great attack, like a great attacking header from Furlong, like perfect. Sort of has taken Allsop out of the game or out of that situation very easily. But I think for what it was, which was just like just a headed goal, it should have been much. It should have been a lot more pressure on him. It was too easy for Furlong to sort of get that header and get the control in the direction that he required. So I do think someone's to blame. Probably Philogene because he's the one who was trying to mark him. But but then again, like the flip side of that, I suppose, is like in like Greaves and Allsop and Jones, I suppose, who are the guys who are organising that
Yeah,
defence. You know, like is there someone? I suppose it probably Philogene is probably the best player in that. Because I was going to say, well, should someone else? But well, Seri's like 4 foot nothing. Um, Morton, I suppose, probably has the height, but not a lot of physic. Like in that situation, probably not the necessarily
yeah. I wonder if someone like
physicality.
Giles maybe.
Yeah, so I guess like that's the other side. You go, oh well, if there's a big aerial threat coming in, is who they've decided to mark him up against, like also part of the
Or do
conversation.
you, or do you go even more extreme and you say, is it Racinia's fault for not going old school and having players on the posts? If you have a player on the post, that ball's not going in.
Well, that is also true. I
If we
guess
want to talk Sunday League, you always put
well,
players on the post, don't you?
that's true. Yeah, we do. But yeah, I suppose the thing, I guess, yeah, it's one of those weird ones because you put players on the post, but now like that they don't hold there anyway. They're trained like even if you play off like mark the post, they're trained to step out that instant as soon as that ball's whipped in, essentially anyway, to try and catch any like strikers who are sitting on the goalkeeper to get caught offside or whatever anyway. So I think potentially would have helped, but then also you put a man on the post, that's another man free in the box,
Yeah.
another head to aim at. So I don't know. It's sort of I think you could probably just keep going around and around, apportioning blame to different people and not really get anywhere. Um,
Yeah.
it's I guess it's someone else's job, match analysis.
Fair
Really,
enough. Well,
someone
on
in
the match
City's
analysis,
backroom staff.
yeah, no, all good. What were your votes for this game?
Yeah, look, that's a good question. Uh, I'm going to definitely pretend that I thought about it. I'll go the cheap option, and we'll go 3 points to Carvalho for his wonder goal. Um, and I'm not actually sure on the others. There's players that I want to name, but I'm not sure if it's just for this game or that I've just generally been impressed with them over their appearances so far. Fuck it. I'm gonna go 2 to Giles. I think I've just, as I said, I'm not necessarily, which is maybe not fair, but I don't know if it's necessarily for this game specifically or just like he just generally seems to have positive involvements. And now, like it's not he didn't have a
Yeah,
poor game, but and then probably this for this almost the same reason is actually Omer, I think, has had, and probably admittedly this probably was not one of his. I think this and his first appearance were probably his weakest of the appearances so far, but I think he makes some really smart runs and he wants to get on the ball in space, and actually doesn't seem to try and do too much with it, which is a nice sort of balance against someone like Philogene, and some of those guys who just want to get the ball at their feet and run at players and stuff. So it's good. I think he has some really good attributes, which are, I think, positive for us generally.
Yeah, and Giles got the assist, so it's not a crazy shout to throw him in there. I've gone Greaves for the 3. I thought his ability at the back to break up the play and break up the attacks and sort of rebound. I think he's sort of under the radar a little bit in his performances. I mean, I say under the radar. I mean, a lot of people are praising him at the moment, but his performances the last month, I'd say, have really gone up another notch. I think there was a period this season where I was starting to look at him and think, is he actually going to be worth the huge fees that we sort of expected him to sort of naturally progress to commanding? But now over the last month or so, I think he is starting to take that next step, and he's showing it against these, the Southamptons and the West Broms, that he can hold his own. And there was that period where he'd be like grabbing people's shirts all the time at corners and stuff, and we'd go, oh, it's not great defensive play. And he's sort of progressed beyond that now, which is great. And the biggest thing for me is he's sitting on 9 yellow cards, and he's been on 9 yellow cards for, I don't know, 2 or 3, 4 games now, where if he hits that 10th yellow, he misses 2 games. And I don't think it resets until we get to 38 games played, which is like another 4 games. So I think he had a pretty clumsy tackle against West Brom, which on another day could have been a yellow. And you see him be so apologetic to the ref because you can just see it in his mind, just going, don't give me that yellow, please. So all credit to him. I went Carvalho for the 2 for the goal. Could have had a second as well. I mean, rebounds to him from that Philogene shot that hits the post. Philogene's hit the post a few times in recent games. It seemed to me that when it fell to Carvalho, he was going to score it, but it almost seemed like he had too much time. He sort of took the touch, tried to play the perfect shot, and kind of got under it a little bit too much. So gave him the 2 for the goal nonetheless. One vote I went Allsop. West Brom went down the other end, had their own poster, and then almost scored off the rebound. And while you could say that the player taking the shot should have done a bit better with it, the fact that Allsop's diving to his left and then still gets his boot studs back to the right to push that ball off target was really, really impressive. Had another couple of good saves as well. So he's had a really big rebound in form over the last month or so, which is basically coincided with Panda coming in. So it's almost as if he's sort of risen to that challenge of holding on to that number 1 jersey. So that was great to see from him. All right, well, we'll move on then. We've just sort of slated him for his game against West Brom, but we will do our player of the week in review, which is Tyler Morton, who joined us on loan from Liverpool this season. 28 appearances, 3 goals scored. Deadline day arrival, I think he was literally on the deadline. The club sort of held out to sort of tease the announcement of his signature. And I must say, I didn't pay too much attention to him at Blackburn last season, so I didn't quite know what quality of player we were getting in. But he's almost the typical sort of, or quintessential sort of quality young loan signing that we need to be hoping to be able to just bring in season after season to sort of supplement the squad, which obviously, you're like Harvey Vale and Xavier Simons last season were meant to be, but this is almost like on another level. And he's if we could sign him permanently as that Seri successor, like he's made for it. But I think his fortunes lie in the Premier League if we aren't to be there next season.
Quality young player. I sort of the same. I didn't really know what to expect too much when he signed. I thought, you go coming through Liverpool, the academy, like coming through Liverpool, like then he'll have some decent attributes. But I think I didn't like. I expected that he'd have like a role to play, but I didn't actually realize how. I didn't expect how essentially dominant he would become in that sort of position. That he's like, we were going like, we talk about Slater a lot, and last season, how important he was in that midfield and how influential he was, and to think, that he's a guy that was first name on the team sheet every week last season, and he's been ousted to the bench by a 21-year-old we've got on loan from Liverpool. Sort of speaks volumes of the quality that Morton possesses, even though they're very different styles of central midfielders. But I think his his obviously his touch and his quality on the ball, but I think just generally he for the most part shows a really good game awareness, and you know is able to can play a pass, is able to hold the ball under pressure, sort of picks most of the time picks the right moments to drop in deep to receive that pass and play their way out of trouble. And I think probably it's been really interesting watching him progress over the season as well, because I think earlier in the season there was a lot more of him in an attacking sense as well, getting in, in those areas, playing the 1-2s, getting them the ball back on sort of the edge of the opponent's 18-yard and sort of running in behind and doing that sort of stuff. But he seems to have sort of curbed that from his game a little bit, I think, more in order, I think, to just allow. I think we brought in reinforcements and stuff, but I think just to allow those other the attacking threats we have to flourish. And I think he's sort of mostly just developing really nice and getting the balance right in the way that he is sort of controlling that midfield. But I think he's a good signing. I sort of tend to agree. If by some lucky circumstance we could get him, I'd be more than happy. Was
We've
something I
got
was
this.
just
Yeah,
gonna. I was actually just about to mention that you go, well, with Klopp leaving at the end of the season, and someone new comes in, potentially new style of play, new style of everything, that maybe some of these players are going to be overlooked, and it's going to be a very new look Liverpool sort of squad. The flip side is that potentially some new manager comes in who really values youth, and actually really wants to give some of these guys, young players, a go in place of maybe some of those big money signings who are maybe not performing to the level that is expected, or who have been off injured for long
just going to
periods
say,
or
off all
whatever.
these. You look at their League Cup final, and I'm sure Morton's looking at it pretty enviously, because it's Klopp's last season, and he's just played a bunch of kids in that League Cup final, which I have no doubt if Morton was still at Liverpool, he would have been playing front and center in that game. And so he could have silverware to his name, playing in Klopp's last season. He must be looking at it kind of going, geez, what if? But you're right. And so's AM Rains in the chat, who had that comment that there's every chance that with managerial change at Liverpool that maybe there is a possibility of getting him in permanently. I'd love that to be the case. I think I would never say never. Like, you look at Ojun and you can never say never with some of the business that he's been able to do for us. But I think in my mind, for it to happen, it's a summer where we sell Greaves and we sell Philogene for a combined 40 or 50 million, which I don't think is ludicrous. I think 15 to 20 for Greaves and 30 to 35 for Philogene is certainly possible. Then you're suddenly saying, okay, we've got a big wad of cash to go out and spend 10 to 15 on Delap, 10 to 15 on Morton, and we might well see that that's the best course of action. We might say we'd rather just back ourselves to get the next Morton in on loan and actually invest that money in a new winger and a new centre back. Who knows? But yeah, again, I guess it's dangerous in these days to say never. It could happen. It could certainly happen. And Ojun has done that sort of thing before. So it will be, and it's where we come back to, like we talked last week, Logan and I, about is there a concern about the loan army, or so to speak, that we have in the squad and what we do in the summer? And I just think it's just not worth worrying about, because with the business we've done these last two windows, you just can't bet against the club doing something that brings in talent that we just didn't even think we'd be able to access.
Yeah, and as you say, there's not really, it's something that will get dealt with when the time is right. We'll make decisions, at the end of the season on those loan players, one way or the other, whether that is, exercising an option to buy, or making an offer to buy, or just letting them return to their parent clubs. And I think you're also right when you say I just sort of got to trust in Ojun and Tan, because for the most part the moves they're making are pretty positive ones, and they are pulling off some real coups, I suppose is probably the best way to describe it. Like, players that we would not typically be connected with, that would not typically be choosing Hull City over others. And I think that's important. It's not just like, we're their only option or whatever, like that, that we're not like the, last chance saloon or whatever. Like, these are players who are in their, prime, who are choosing us over other offers in, how to phrase this politely, more desirable parts of the world, or
Yeah,
like,
but or
bigger
even in
clubs
more desirable
or.
leagues. Like
Mm,
I'm pretty sure Carvalho was getting, maybe it was only remote interest, but I'm pretty sure Wolves and a few others were looking at
mm,
Carvalho, and he was happy to come here. And obviously, maybe that's more game time or whatever it might be. But yeah, you're right. Like, players could have very easily gone to a Leeds or a Southampton and been almost guaranteed of a promotion. But they're seeing the style of play. They're seeing the nature of the club. Like, you look at a Giles coming in and how he's embraced the club so much. It's exciting. AM Rames with the follow-up saying Delap won't get a look in at City, and Jaden should not be sold if he has to be. Then it's got to be 50 million. Cole Palmer and Rico Lewis are fringe England first team and are pulling the price tags. I, I think it's a fair point, and I think I was sort of saying in the chat, I was trying to get everyone's thoughts on this, and maybe we're sort of transitioning from Morden into a broader transfer chat, and we'll go on to the games in a second. But what it's a really interesting one with Philogene, because I'm like, he's in England under 21. He's got, what is it, eight goals in 18 appearances or something, and something similar in assists, 6 or 7 assists. And I think, there's the reported interest from a Liverpool, from a Spurs, from all these big Premier League clubs, and I'm sure there's interest from overseas as well. It's hard not to, like, you look at like a Harvey Barnes at Leicester, for example, and granted, he had some runs on the board in the Premier League as well, so I'm not going to necessarily say he's worth that sort of price tag, but I don't see Philogene as miles away from that sort of player, and it's more I almost think it's the perception of the club he's coming from, where because Leicester were relegated and it's Barnes and it's Maddison and so on, and they're going to get these big fees, but it's just little old Hull City, so therefore Philogene's only worth like 15 million. Where I'm like, well, I do think like it also comes down to what's he worth to us. Like, I think we've had this discussion before, but it's like, and I think Ajun or Baz or someone made comments in January about it, where it's like, even if we got offered 30 million, you'd almost say, why would we sell when he's worth almost more than that to us in terms of what his output is?
yeah, it's a very interesting like conversation about Philogene, because I think you're right. I think like the other thing that seems to be forgotten is, like, if he'd have stayed at Villa, like, I think it would have been.
Sorry, we just got aim range in the chat. So he works at Leicester City. So shouting out Barnes and Maddison in that chat. But yeah, just example.
Had he stayed at Villa, Premier League club, he would have got some game time in the Premier League this season. Like, would he have been a regular starter all season? Probably not, but undoubtedly at some point in the season he would have been playing Premier League football. And so the only thing that we like, and obviously, for a player at his age and his quality, he wants to be playing football. And so we were able to offer him, game time. But like, he already before he came to us was a player who was on the books of a Premier League club and was in their squad, was capable of playing Premier League football. So I think it is that there's a perception of us, and where we are in the table, and our history, and us as a club as being, not a club who can command a high fee. But I think sort of you're right. Like, the fees are not shouldn't be a reflection of the club that a player is at, but on their qualities, and their their attributes, and their form, and all sorts of other weird intangibles. But Philogene 100% is someone who, if he can maintain that form, he can continue to have output for the rest of the season. Then, I can't see any reason why he shouldn't be capable of generating, big money interest. And then the flip side as well, like, if Villa doesn't come to the party and it doesn't activate the buyback or whatever, then why would we sell him? And there's
Yeah,
all sorts of weird stuff with that as well. But
And on the point about someone like a Cole Palmer, it's where I find it quite funny when they're playing in the same international team in the under-21s together. I think it was as recently as November last year. I think it was the game where Philogene scored and Delap also scored. And you think he's on the same pitch as Cole Palmer. He's just got man of the match in a game that also features Cole Palmer. Cole Palmer's now in the England setup, scoring all these goals for Chelsea, worth 50 million or whatever it was that they paid for Man City. And I'm not saying that means that he's an equal or better player than Cole Palmer, but I'm just like, when he's shared a pitch with Cole Palmer, he hasn't looked out of place and he's performed better necessarily. It's going to be a really interesting one, and it looks like because of the amount of interest that we have in him, that buyback from Villa at 15 million is just going to be laughed at, and I think that only gets triggered if we're in the Premier League anyway. So you think if you've got 3, 4, 5 of those big clubs all genuinely interested, we've just got to be sitting there saying, well, bidding starts at like 30, 35 million and you go from there. Because otherwise it's just not worth our business selling him. And yeah, look, as Aimrans is saying, that there are League 1 and 2 players pulling 15, 20 million price tags. So why can't we expect double for Philogene? And that's where it gets exciting and almost hard to predict what happens in the summer, because we just don't know, A, if we sell these players, and B, how much we get from them. So look, it's all to look forward to. So I'm sure there'll be plenty more discussion about that before the end of the season. But we will go through our previews. We've got a few games coming up. We're going to look at the next 3 games because we'll actually be off next week with no episode. So we'll look at all 3 of the Preston, Birmingham, and Leicester games, which I think actually sort of neatly rounds it out, because that takes us up to that. We'll have a 20-day break between the Leicester game and the Stoke fixture because of the first international break, and then also the game against Coventry has been postponed after Coventry won in the FA Cup. So this sort of takes us up to the end of this sort of period of the season, I suppose, before the run-in. And it starts this weekend with Preston, who I've got to admit I didn't expect to see this sort of resurgence from. Ryan Lowe was sort of on the way out almost with Preston, with the amount of losses that they were sort of suffering and just not able to back up their early season form. But it's almost with the return of John Arnorisa from injury. Robbie Brady's looking great for them, and Will Keane, so a couple of old Tiger heads in there as well. But they're certainly looking to be one of the most capable sides to challenge for the playoffs, I should say, which would be quite an interesting fixture. But there's something about it. I still look at it and go, it should be 3 points. But I know that's probably the wrong way to look at it.
No, I don't know. I think
4 wins in their last 5. Like, that's a dangerous team.
Yeah, we're about the same, though. So true. I think it's going to be a matchup of probably in terms of quality. I think it'll be equal to probably the last couple of games, like the Saints game and the West Brom game. I think we're both good games with 2 good teams playing good football for the most part. So I think it'll be another game like that. But I'm fairly confident that we can get the job done, and sort of continue on our positive run. We seem to be in a really nice sort of it's almost a purple patch of form again. So I'd really like us to be able to capitalize and sort of as we sort of said, just consolidate those or extend those gaps, consolidate that place in the top 6 just a little bit further. But I just think the last couple of games, especially against those the high quality teams we've played, just some of the best football I've seen from City probably ever. And we just those new signings just seem to be starting to sort of really, those combinations are really starting to gel, I suppose. So I think I feel real positively about our chances. But I think probably would be potentially some of those changes that we discussed in regards to the West Brom game. I think maybe having a recognised striker, and Connolly came on late and tried to do some stuff, tried to get involved. Maybe he is an option to start from the top to stretch that defence and give some of those other guys, someone like Carvalho in behind, or Amur, or whoever it is, probably Carvalho, but a little bit of extra space and time on the ball would be, I think, insane, very dangerous for us.
Yeah, I think it's a hard one. I think I think 3 points here would be massive. I'm really sort of reassured with the fact that you look at our last two games against Southampton and West Brom, and I think we've played really well. And I think the concern before that was that we were winning games, but not doing so with much positive play, or not very good football. So it seems as if we're rising to the occasion, which is really good to see. It's not like we're going missing. I really like Giles's comments after the West Brom game of basically backing us to go undefeated for the rest of the season. And I'm like, mate, go and do it. We're happy to see it. Do it. So he's clearly the squad's full of confidence. It's, as you say, I mean, it's 1 loss in 7 now, which all of a sudden is a really good run of form. And, confidence breeds confidence, and it should mean that the players can go into this game feeling, as much as Preston will be quite confident that they can get a result, puts us in a really good position as well. I think you're right. Like, for me, I think the change would probably be, it's a really tough one. I mean, you almost look, it's either Zaruri or Omer who comes out for Connolly, purely from the point of view of, throw them on late with that energy to make a difference in the second half, rather than it being that they're not doing anything particularly well. It's just, it's, the finisher versus the starter, if you want to use that phraseology instead of the substitute. It's, bringing on players to finish the game off. Like, Tufan's almost become that. His energy late in games is really helping us see out games or turn them in our favour. So I think I'd probably say Connolly in for Omer from the start would be my change. And there's no other changes that need to be made, is there? No injuries. So I think that would be it. And I mean, it was 1-0 last time. It was that Philogene wonder goal from the wing. So it's hard to read into that whether we do match up favorably with them. I mean, they're full of confidence. I can't see us keeping a clean sheet. I think it'd be like a 2-1 or something like our favorite scoreline at the moment is 2-1. So potentially tipping that. What do you think?
Yeah, I think in terms of changes and the way that would work, it's probably, I agree that probably Omer comes out, because I think it just makes a nice, you want to bring, say, Carvalho off late, and someone like Omer coming in is almost like a perfect like for like. But yeah, I'm probably, I don't know. I'm going to go confident, although not too confident. I'm going to go with a 1-0. I reckon we can keep clean. I think what's probably one thing, as you were talking, I was thinking, what's really, really promising about this run is, that some of those games have been, ugly wins, and some have been, really nice. And so it shows that we, when teams don't want to play football and they want to shut the game down and things, we are actually now finding ways to get a win despite that. And when teams want to come and play, well, we can play. So I think, if we can keep this run going, this confidence, the football going, then, we are a very dangerous proposition in this run in. And yeah, we can create some chaos for, the chasing pack, in the coming weeks with some wins.
I'd love this to be, the 3-0 against Middlesbrough, the 3-0 against Peterborough that we've seen in previous promotion seasons, where we go to a promotion rival and just batter them and boost the goal difference as well. We need to start winning games by more than 1 goal. So I would like to see a few more goals in this one, but I'll take the 3 points if we can get it.
So if we keep winning, our goal difference is just going to keep going up.
I was thinking that the other week. I was like, yeah, our goal difference is creeping up. It's like, we just take the 1-0 wins, but if we get 4 wins, it's, +4 to the goal difference. That's fine. That's all we need. Yeah, certainly. We've got Birmingham midweek, and it's, pretty rare, I suspect, that you face a side 4 times in the season and have 4 different managers in the dugout for them. And of course, we send our thoughts to Tony Mowbray, who, is not there by choice. Obviously having a bit of medical treatment. He's out for about 6 to 8 weeks, I think, for that. So hopefully he gets better, because he's, he's one of the top quality managers in this division when he gets his sides up and running. So all the best wishes to him. But in his absence, it's Mark Venus in charge of Birmingham, who have hit a bit of a sticky patch since that change of management. They've only got the 2 wins in their last 5, so they're getting sucked a little bit into that relegation battle. And I suppose you look at it as, of these 3 games that we're looking at, this is definitely the most winnable. And whether we win, lose, or draw to Preston, if we were to lose or draw, and we're suddenly looking at it, well, a draw against West Brom and maybe worst case a loss to Preston. I say that right? Draw to West Brom and lost to Preston. You'd be saying, well, we need to bounce back. So 3 points in this game, I think, is of the 3 games almost the I wouldn't say the most important, because I think that'd be Preston, but I think this is one that we really need to focus on taking the 3 points no matter what.
It's been. I think they've been interesting battles each time we've played them for different reasons. Obviously, the 2 cup games were a bit interesting. I think with a lot of youth, and I think they sort of struggled to break us down with a lot of youth in those squads. So I feel like this is a game that is comfortable for us. Realistically, it's a game where you talk about wanting to boost goal difference. This is probably that opportunity to really do that and to put a team to the sword and go and grab 3 or 4 goals. I think this is that game where we can do that. So I'm pretty confident that we'll pick up 3 points against Birmingham. Hopefully not too. I'm not overconfident, but I just think, they're just not in a good run, not in a good position, and obviously, as you say, pretty difficult circumstances behind the scenes with Tony Mowbray. So I think just take advantage of it.
In more positive news, it being the early hours of Wednesday morning, I might be watching it with a little one at that point, so that would be quite fun as well. So we'll see how that all goes. But that to look forward to. We've got Amrans in the chat saying, how far away from each other are we? A bit off topic, but I was just trying to think about it while you were talking. What would it be? That by road it would be what, 4 or 5 hours? Because you're up near Coffs, aren't you?
I'm about an hour and a half north of Coffs, so to get down to you to Sydney is about 6 or so hours.
Yeah, okay. So 6 or 7 hours. I'm trying to convert that to the UK. Would that be? No, I'm going to need some help with that one. I don't actually know distances in the UK, but it would be almost just what London to Hull be a bit more than 6 hours? I reckon it'd be roughly that. Maybe. I'm probably got that wildly wrong.
1.6.
I'm going to look up what
6 k's to the mile. So what's about be like 400 miles or something?
Yeah. Okay. Let's go. I'm going to do this live while we're talking. London to Hull. What's that by car? That is. Oh, it's late. So London to Hull is 4 hours.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, as Amran says, that's like Leicester to Scotland. Like that Australia is a big place, people. We are
decent drive. And we've been lucky enough to get together a couple of times.
Yeah, that's it. I was actually chatting to a mate from England the other day, and when he was over here back in 2012, we did the trip from the Gold Coast down to Sydney in a single night, and I reckon we left the Gold Coast at maybe about 7 p.m. and we got to Sydney at about 6 a.m. or something like that. So it's it's a big country. We did score predictions for this one. I think you were saying like 3 or 4. I'd probably say 2. Yeah, something like that. And so Amrans was saying, whether we take the draw against Preston and smash Leicester. So we'll talk Leicester now. And for a while there, it was actually quite nice. We were the only side to have beaten them this season. Got that comment coming back again. They've dropped a few games since then. They've actually lost their last 2 as well, which puts them in a pretty interesting spot in terms of the automatic spots. So we've got that Saturday week essentially. Another interesting game in that sense, because I suppose you look at it like the Southampton game where you go, the pressure's off us to an extent. And I think a lot will depend on how we go against Preston and Birmingham as to how much that's true. Because if we picked up, say, 4 points from Preston and Birmingham, which I'd be pretty happy with, it would presumably put us in a pretty healthy spot in the top 6. And then you're sort of looking at consolidating that spot. Leicester being under pressure, they're top of the table. They're sort of on for a record points tally, but their fans are calling their style of football boring. They're playing out from the back too much. It's all very familiar, isn't it? So it's an interesting place to be at the moment, but they're for the taking.
Yeah, I think this is probably the one I'm most worried about. Just, I guess, yeah, because they are obviously top of the league for a reason, and they are also, I think a little bit of a drop in form is probably really dangerous because they're going to want to get back to that. They're going to they're going to want to finish as champions. They're going to want to finish on top of the league, and I think they'll be looking for every opportunity to arrest, this little slide. So I think they're probably actually.
We won't tell anyone. Yeah, it's Abraham saying Leicester are boring, and say that on here without getting sacked. Secret safe with us.
But yeah, I think it's probably the one I'm most worried about. But I still feel really fairly confident that we can get at least a point from it. I think,
but worried in the sense that you think that they might smash us, or
no, not. I don't think they'll like blow us away, but I think it's one that we could lose. I think they just, they've got some really good, like, whether they're playing boring football or not, they've got some, really good quality players as well. So I think, I don't know. It's one of those weird ones. It's just a vibe I get from them and this game. I'm not sure. I don't really know how to quantify it exactly.
The one thing we didn't talk about with the West Brom game, which I'm just having flashbacks to now because I was about to say the same thing about Leicester, is I remember playing Leicester and thinking that their goalkeeper was awful. And the thing we didn't talk about with the West Brom game, their goalkeeper was awful. Palmer, everything he did was horrendous. I don't know how we didn't score more goals. We just didn't test him enough. But I look at the Leicester keeper in the same way. I think he's there to be put under pressure, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair point. And I guess that's probably where we're talking about, it's the sort of players and who we bring in. And I think someone like Connolly, who really wants to get into that space in the box, like with a little ball over the top or whatever, and really get in there and make the keepers make decisions, is probably something that's really beneficial for that. And you sort of wonder if you had someone like, if we had him on from the start, say against West Brom, not that I want to go back to that conversation too much, but who's going to get into the box and take shots and put pressure and chase down whenever they play it around the back or whatever. Like, I think not. I mean, yeah, Carvalho did that a bit, but I just think, yeah, probably we just need to test some of those keepers when they are suspect as much as possible. So you're probably right. We didn't take as many shots as we probably should have. We didn't get as many opportunities in there. We didn't have enough pressure on him for spills, because there was a couple of real dicey ones where it almost fell to us, and if someone was in the right spot, it's almost like a tap in. I think a couple of corners where he sort of came out and sort of grabbed it and spilled it and sort of recovered. But yeah, I don't know. Just got a weird vibe about the Leicester game. That's my final say. I don't really know exactly what it is about it. Maybe it's just their position, that they're on top and they've been there. But as you say, the pressure's all on them really with that game, because and how often does it happen that teams on top for so long and then just the last hurdle drops those few games, drops those few points, loses those few games and slips away. I mean, it happened to us once upon a time. So
it gets so close that the players start tightening up a bit. You're right. And Reigns is saying Zaruri can exploit him. I think Zaruri is definitely one, expose him, I should say. Zaruri is definitely one of those ones who can take those longer shots. Yeah, I think, look, I think for me, if we take 4 points from these 3 games, I come away happy. Anything more than that, I'm really happy. Anything less probably means that we've either lost to Preston or Birmingham, and I'm a bit disappointed. Look, I mean, it could be draws in both of them, but yeah, I think that's sort of how I'm viewing it. So I think a loss to Leicester's acceptable in those terms. But I look at the Southampton game, I look at the West Brom game, and I think we should be going into any game in this division at the moment thinking we can get something. And Giles, you got to walk the walk after talking the talk. If he thinks we can go undefeated, this is a perfect game to show that we can match it with the best.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is it's really hard, I think, doing those sort of the 3-game previews when you're looking so far ahead, because it is what it is. Like, no, it's fun. I think it's like it's good to have the discussion, but I think it's really because like it's all about like the context and the form and the flow. And I think like
Sure.
we've had this conversation now, but if we go out and we smash Preston and smash Birmingham, then I go, well, we're fucking winning, we're fucking beating Leicester.
Yeah.
But if we, like as you say, we sort of scrape by, maybe scrape a draw out of Preston, and we beat Birmingham, and then you go, well, I'm not super confident, and I probably feel sort of how I feel now, where it's a bit like maybe we compete, maybe we it becomes a smash and grab, maybe they sort of smash and grab us, whatever. But yeah, I think it's just be interesting to see. I think like how I guess my potentially my view changes over these first two games anyway.
Yeah, you would have hated doing the podcast back in our first season because that was before Tigers TV. We literally did an episode. Every episode was like a bookend of televised games. So we'd basically go like an episode a month. And you go, well, we've had like 6 games this month that we're going to review, and then we're going to preview the next 5. And it was a very different podcast experience back in those days, which thankfully these days we can actually watch all the games and we can actually talk about them. It wasn't just sort of finding highlights to review games. But yeah, look, I think you're completely right. And I even look at it from like that Southampton game's a perfect example where you sort of looked at this stretch of games and went, oh, geez, where are we picking up points? Like I'd take, 7 points or 8 points from this run and it's going to be such a struggle. And then we picked up 3 points against Southampton and you go, oh, changes everything. So look, it's going to be a crazy 3 games to look forward to. But look, thank you for joining me for this one, Dan.
No worries. Anytime.
And thanks everyone for listening in. Yeah, we will be off next week, and then obviously we've got the 2 or 3 weeks off after that with a break in play. So we will find our time to get back to you guys to review these 3 games. Well, hopefully it's 3 wins for City. But until next time, come on, City.